London, July 1546. In the suffocating heat of a merciless summer, a young woman is dragged across the stone courtyard of the tower. Her legs shattered on the rack hang limp. Beneath her skirts, she cannot walk, cannot stand, and yet she is carried, not toward freedom, but toward the fire. Anne Askew refuses to say a single sentence, one sentence that could save her from the stake. I recant my faith. But her mouth stays closed and her gaze burns as her body soon will. Who was this woman who made royal men tremble? What did she possess that drove powerful bodies to torture? And what remains of a body that refuses to betray its soul? In an age where words are weapons and belief is a political act, Anne Askew stands as a paradox, woman and thinker, noble and heretic, silent and unshakable. Her story is no relic of the distant past. It is the echo of every voice that was silenced for refusing to bow. The English Reformation is at its bloodiest. Henry VIII has broken from Rome, but his court is no haven for free thought. On the contrary, faith has become a weapon used to eliminate rivals and protect the throne. Speak out of step with the king, and you risk not only your position, but your head, or worse. Why tell this story now? Because Anne's fate is not that of one woman, but of many who clung to a truth no one wanted to hear, because her breaking bones marked the breaking point of a society torn apart by fear, hypocrisy, and the fight for control. And because her death was not an end, but a beginning of female defiance, spiritual conviction, and moral remembrance. Anne Askew was born in 1521 in the windswept village of Stallingborough, a place of low fog, sodden earth, and whispering reeds. The mornings were often silent, the air cold, enough to bite the skin. Her family home stood firm and austere, its wooden beams stained, dark with age, the smell of parchment mingling with smoke from the hearth. Inside, the rules were as rigid as the architecture. Her father, Sir William Askew, was a loyalist to both the Crown and the Church, strict in doctrine, firmer still in discipline. Anne grew up not with lullabies, but with psalms. Her childhood was a catechism obedience, carved into daily life, but something in her resisted the mold. Even as a girl, she had questions no one wanted to answer, while other daughters stitched samplers and recited prayers by rote. Anne's eyes wandered to the Latin texts her brothers read, and when she discovered Tyndale's English Bible, forbidden, dangerous, alive, it was as if a door opened inside her. She read in secret by candlelight, lips moving soundlessly. It wasn't devotion, it was study, a hunger to understand without intercession. To read scripture in her own tongue was, in that time, a political act. But Anne didn't read to provoke. She read because she had to. Then came death, not hers, but her sister's, and with that came marriage. Her sister's. Widower Thomas Gyme was offered Anne's hand. She was not yet 20. The ceremony was perfunctory, joyless, no music played, no garlands hung, just an exchange of property dressed as matrimony. Gyme was everything Anne was not: practical, rigid, incurious. He believed in order, in ritual, in a wife who bowed to the church and to him. Anne tried at first. She held her tongue, folded linens, prayed aloud at meals, but each silence grew heavier every time he corrected. Her scripture, her resolve hardened. Their home turned cold, not from winter, but from the absence of recognition. They shared meals without words, glances without warmth. He wanted obedience. She wanted truth. It became unbearable for him. In the end, he cast her out. It was meant as punishment, but Anne received it as freedom. She leaves the countryside, not as a woman who failed, but as someone finally allowed to speak. But if silence was safety, Anne was already in danger. She moves to London, where reformers whisper in salons and courtly chambers about faith, grace, and danger. Anne becomes involved with a small but influential circle of evangelicals. Surrounding Queen Catherine Parr, women and scholars who secretly read the English Bible and discuss Lutheran ideas. Anne speaks in private gatherings, quotes Paul to noblewomen, and distributes pamphlets that question the infallibility of priests. She is no preacher, but her words carry weight. She asks questions no man dares answer in public, not to provoke, but because she simply cannot do otherwise. But in Henry VIII's England, that is a revolutionary act, and revolutionaries, especially when they are women, are rarely left alone. London in the 1540s is a city of smoke, gossip, and religious fracture. Behind every wooden door lies a disagreement that could be fatal. In this tension, Anne moves boldly, too boldly for some. Her public readings draw both admirers and informers. She reads from the English Bible in the streets for women who cannot understand Latin. She questions the Eucharist, the priesthood, the role of women in God's design. In 1545, she is arrested for the first time on charges of heresy. During her interrogation at St. Paul's Cathedral, she remains calm. She cites scripture as if it were law, with a clarity that confounds her examiners. They hope for remorse, for submission. Instead, after her release, she writes a pamphlet making her spiritual struggle public, The Examinations. But even as her words sharpen, a shadow grows. What if her silence one day must shield not just herself, but others? It is sharp, lucid, and rare, not a pious lament, but an intellectual defense of female spiritual autonomy. But her words strike powerful nerves. In the highest circles, fears arise that she is more than a heretic, that she is becoming a symbol, especially as it becomes clear that her ideas are shared by women in Queen Catherine Parr's household. The Queen herself is quietly linked to these reformist sympathies. For opponents of religious change, such as Bishop Stephen Gardiner, Anne is an opportunity, a weak link to unravel the entire chain. In 1546, Anne is arrested again, this time with gravity. She is imprisoned in the Tower of London and interrogated by the Privy Council. The questions are not purely theological. They want names. Who supports her? Is the Queen herself involved? Anne remains silent, not out of fear, but conviction. She refuses to betray others, even under the pressure of isolation and threats. Then her interrogators take a step that is extreme, even by the brutal standards of the time. They place her on the rack. Anne is of noble birth. The torture of women of her class is nearly unheard of. But this exception reveals just how threatening she is perceived to be. Two men, Sir Richard Rich and Thomas Wriothesley, the King's Chancellor, personally turn the wheel. They intend to break her, literally. The pain is unbearable. Her hips are dislocated, her knees shattered. Anne cries out, but does not speak. When she is taken from the rack, she can no longer walk or stand, and yet, with a trembling hand, she writes again. Her final text is not a complaint, but a testimony. She writes as though her bones themselves were speaking. I had rather to die than to break my faith. What remains of a body that can no longer kneel but refuses to bow? Anne's bones are broken, but her will is not. Her enemies realize too late. To try to destroy her is to make her a martyr. and martyrs do not die, they are remembered. July 1546. The sky over Smithfield is gray and heavy, as if even heaven refuses to watch. Inn. The public square, usually a market, a wooden platform has been built. Not a pulpit, but a pyre. On top sits a chair, fastened with chains. Anne Askew is bound to it, her legs too ruined. To stand, she is 25. She is not executed alone. 3 others stand beside her. Protestant preachers who also refuse to recant. But Anne is the center, not because she was the loudest, but because she is a woman and unyielding. She cursed no priests, condemned no kings. Her only crime was refusing to lie about what she believed. And that, it seems, is crime enough. The sentence is formal, heresy. In truth, it is a political message. Her silence under torture is read as stubbornness, her refusal to name the Queen as treason. No one in Henry's court wants to take further risk. Anne must disappear, but not quietly. Her death must serve as a warning. Witnesses describe her face as calm. No regret, no panic, only the pale stillness of someone who has nothing left to lose. The wood beneath her creaked, as if even it hesitated, unsure whether to carry a woman or a warning. The crowd is silent. Even the executioner seems to move more slowly. Her bones are already broken. The flames need only to consume, not destroy. A barrel of gunpowder is tied beneath her chair, a mercy meant to hasten the end. When the flames reach her, there is no scream, only smoke, sparks, and the crack of burning timber. The smell of scorched linen mingles with that of flesh. After her death, her words continue to spread. The Examinations of Anne Askew is printed and reprinted by Protestant sympathizers. Her testimony is not silenced, but amplified by her. End. Where Henry hoped her name would die, she becomes a symbol not of rebellion, but of spiritual integrity. What makes Anne's death unforgettable is its quiet symbolism. She was no soldier, no priestess, no political leader. She was a young woman with pain, doubt, and conviction. And yet to power, she was an existential threat because she read, because she thought, because she stayed silent. Her bones, broken at the order of royal men, become a confrontation in history. A confrontation with faith greater than doctrine. With truth that does not belong to institutions. With a woman who, sitting in the fire, not kneeling, delivered one final sermon without a word. Anne Askew did not die the death of a rebel, but of a witness. Her name nearly vanished from official records, but lived on in the margins, in diaries, letters, secret reprints. Her body burned, but her voice remained intact, uncomfortable, clear, and ultimately unmovable. She became the first and only female martyr of the English Reformation whose own words survived. No hagiographies, no male edits. Her voice still speaks from the grave without sentiment, without appeal for vengeance. Only this, faith as an inner compass, not a test of obedience. In her death, Anne holds up a moral mirror. How far are we willing to go not to lie? What price are we prepared to pay to remain true to ourselves? And what happens to a society when that kind of loyalty is seen as a threat? She could have stayed silent. She could have bowed, as so many did, but she chose to remain standing even when she could no longer walk. Anne's death is not the end of a life, but the unveiling of a system. She exposes the fear of power in the face of clarity, the fragility of authority that cannot withstand silence, and the force of a single human being who continues to burn, even in silence. She had refused to speak, and now fire would speak for her. Was Anne Askew a martyr of faith, or a woman who simply refused to lie? What does her silence under pain, under fire, reveal about truth, power, and memory? And if even her broken body was not enough to break her spirit, what does that say about our own choices in times of moral pressure? If silence can be louder than speech, what do our own silences say?